Within weeks, new gangs took their place and the prices were back to normal. Coming up, I'll find out how the authorities are trying to keep up with this cocaine invasion and how the gangs are responding by coming up with ever increasingly ingenious methods for smuggling their drug into the UK. I've been following the trail of the Colombian cocaine gangs on the streets of the UK. I've heard about how the gangs operate, how the police track them down, but huge quantities are still being smuggled into the country. Now I want to find out where the cocaine trail begins and what the UK authorities can do about it.
We're heading out in order to HMS Campbelltown to see how the Royal Navy prepares to take part in counter-narcotics operations.
There are always Royal Navy ships like HMS Campbelltown stationed in the Caribbean, on the lookout for drug smuggling vessels which carry drugs from Colombia to the islands of the Caribbean. From there, the drugs go to the UK, the rest of Europe and the USA. How important is counter-narcotics in terms of what the Royal Navy does?
It's hugely important. I mean, it's certainly one of the most important roles that the Navy fulfills around the world on a daily basis. The principle is to be cued, as we call it, i.e. told where the vessel is, first of all. You then have to be able to deploy a boarding team, typically, either by helicopter or indeed by fast boat, onto the particular target vessel and then conduct a search and then either a detention, an arrest or whatever the situation calls for.
This is footage of a real-life Navy operation in the Caribbean when sailors and Marines search smuggling boats off the Colombian coast. Searching vessels sailing between the islands of the Caribbean can be an unpredictable and sometimes dangerous business. What have you found? Is it largely cocaine or is it a whole kind of different?
Well, I live in the Caribbean area, it's normally cocaine. They're very well organised and sometimes there may not be anything on the vessel itself, so actually internal to it, so you have to look for unusual forms on the hull and things like that. So what they tend to do is pack drugs into steel containers and then weld them onto the hull. The sort of boats that they use are normally fairly high powered, very fast, very difficult to catch. Can normally outrun a warship, but that's why we have the helicopters and fast boats on board, so we can stop them.
This is what happened when one fast boat hiding kilos of cocaine tried to escape the attentions of a Royal Navy Merlin helicopter based in the Caribbean.
We gave chase, however, this guy just was not going to stop, you know, and he was not going to stop because he's got contraband and he knows that if he's boarded, he'll be arrested, the stuff will be confiscated, it would be evidence that would be used against him. So, you know, it's desperate times for them. So they ran. The Merlin downwash is significant. You know, to give you a figure, it's probably like trying to stand up in a 70-knot wind if you were to stand under a hovering aircraft. In the boat, you know, the hazard for them is they can't really see, they can't communicate with each other, but they still plough on, you know, trying to get up to 40 knots of speed in a boat where they can't see what's ahead of them. The chase lasted probably in the region of about 3 to 3.5 hours. It resulted in the end with us, you know, getting permission really from the ship to use shot across the bow. We were thankfully successful. You know, he stopped after 2 bursts from the GPMG and they surrendered themselves, and you know, the other agencies that we worked with then took over after that.
This recent Royal Navy operation recovered cocaine from Colombia worth tens of millions of pounds. Most people think that trying to find narcotics, especially those being brought in by boat, is a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Would you say that that's true?
I would say we're a lot more successful than that. Between February 06 and now, the Royal Navy alone seized 18 tonnes, set against the UK market of approximately 35 to 45 tonnes.
The Navy destroys some of the drug smuggling vessels to prevent them from taking to sea again. Even though I'm on a warship, I have to remind myself that I'm not reporting on a war or a military exercise. This is actually a warship that is training for counter-narcotics operations, seizing cocaine, basically, from Colombian gangs. It's a reminder, it's a stark reminder of just what a huge, huge industry cocaine is, that it takes the Royal Navy to be involved in trying to stop Colombian gangs getting cocaine into Britain. In spite of the efforts of the Royal Navy, tons of cocaine still get through. The cartels stop at nothing to get their products into the UK. Cocaine has been found in chandeliers, dried prunes, candles, tins of biscuits, even concealed in the shafts of golf clubs. And when customs officers examined these cans of tuna, they found that 1,044 of the 26,000 tins were filled with cocaine instead of fish. They contained 85 kilos of the drug, with a street value of £4.25 million. But there was one operation that tested the police's knowledge of Colombian crime gangs to the limit. I went to find the unassuming warehouse in a North London alley where officers were confronted with one gang's unique and almost undetectable way of smuggling cocaine. The man behind the Colombian gang was Johnny Mejia, a suspected cocaine smuggler. Undercover officers had him under surveillance when he took delivery of an unusual package from Panama.
We became aware that he was going to accept some delivery of some doors. Now, he wasn't a legitimate businessman or anything like that. Delivery of any furniture or anything like that to him was obviously suspicious to us.
Police tracked Mejia plus the doors to these small warehouses and artists' workshops.
We were conducting surveillance on him, and he was quite obviously doing something at the premises. He had been to the DIY shops, purchasing decorator suits, masks, cheese grater and a strainer and such like. And during the course of surveillance we also saw a very large container, oil drum, being delivered to the location as well. So we obviously felt that something was taking place there.
Just quiet little sort of businesses, a lot of woodwork, carpentry workshops.
We believed that they were certainly doing something as regards their criminal activities, and decided that we should intervene.
Police knew they were tracking a known cocaine smuggler, but they were still mystified about what they'd find behind the locked doors. So tell me what it was like when you actually entered this place where the doors were being stored.
As soon as the door was opened, pungent smells coming out from there. It's a very, very small unit with no windows in it, and on entering in it, there was a corner of it that had been made into like a sterile area with plastic sheeting. There was obviously a lot of noise going on in there, a lot of dust. I suppose everyone's going in and thinking, where's the drugs, where's the drugs? There was no big bags of white powder or anything like that. And there was these big doors. One door was being worked on, being demolished effectively. There was two men in there, two of the further men arrested. One of the guys was effectively cutting up the door.
Can you give me your name, please?
Diego.
Can you look at the camera, please? What is your full name, please?
Diego.
No, your full name.
Castillo.
Thank you.
There they are, so basically masks on, suits on. They were effectively stripping these doors down.
In the bag we have a cheese grater, a hair dryer, plastic box, work suit.
Knowing that there was cocaine somewhere, but baffled by what they'd found, the police took the doors to the forensic science labs.
This is actually what the doors look like, and underneath this part of it was the actual MDF type material. So when I took off this front part, you can see there, it looks just like MDF or that type of material. If you drilled through it, you would only see sawdust. There would be no white powder or any other material coming through.
That's when the resident forensics expert began testing the doors and made an amazing discovery. Using the same method as the suspects, he grated wood from the door and mixed it with a solvent. Then he tested the contents of the residue.
The MS mass spectrometry part smashes the molecules apart, and we then get a jigsaw picture. And so we can say without any doubt it's definitely cocaine based on the results that I got.
The doors were literally impregnated with liquid cocaine.
This was actually the first time we've ever encountered anything like that in the UK.
This has been done this way in South America, in Colombia, in the jungle sort of atmosphere, as it were, out the open. But we also discovered there's no ventilation in this unit, no windows, nothing. And if they had done what they intended to do, they could quite possibly have died from the fumes. Just over 17 kilos of cocaine, pure cocaine, was retrieved from 4 doors.
That's incredible.
We're talking the wholesale value about 1.2 million. Because it was pure, you could cut it through maybe 3 times to make it just over 50.
Siema, ja bym teraz.
Pozdro dla SC.